Welcome to the Money Mile Podcast. I'm your host, Justin Waller, and we are happy you are here. We like to think of Money Mile as standing at the corner of triathlon and personal finance. We believe that age group triathletes are the lifeblood of our sport, and we like shining the light on some good people doing great things in our sport. Today, we are going to have our Questions on Course segment and a new guest to the show, Amy Woolsey, a successful age group triathlete in Minnesota who has been involved in triathlon for more than 22 years. Stick around to hear more about Amy's triathlon journey and how the sport has been such a formative aspect in her life as a means to maintaining her mental health, an avenue for building friendships, and a place to share her faith after we discuss our Questions on Course. Please keep in mind that these are for educational purposes only and not financial advice about your individual situation. So I have paraphrased the question for this episode, and in short, it is, I am planning for an early retirement. I am concerned about healthcare, the options available, and how this interacts with Medicare. For context, this person is married and their spouse has recently retired. Why do we maintain health insurance at all? Ultimately, for most of my clients, it's to avoid catastrophe. The cost of a single cancer treatment can be hundreds of thousands of dollars, and it can be very difficult to rebound from that if you don't have health insurance. The state of health insurance in the U.S. these days is challenged for sure, but I still recommend maintaining coverage to avoid catastrophes if at all possible. Now, a couple of primary options there that we want to look at are employer coverage, so continuation after you retire, or spousal coverage. So if you are married or have a domestic partner, you may be able to get coverage through your partner or spouse if you are retiring before the age of 65 and still want to maintain healthcare. The impacts of Medicare at age 65 are significant. Medicare becomes your primary insurer at age 65, and there are a couple of different structures for that, and there are always some options and ways to get out of it, but there are a couple of primary things that you look at. The first of which are the senior advantage type of plans, and these are typically for budget-conscious clients, or if you just happen to have a preference for that system. As an example, the Kaiser Permanente system is Kaiser Senior Advantage, and if you happen to be one of those folks that just love the Kaiser system, signing on for the Kaiser Senior Advantage plan can absolutely make sense. The traditional Medicare plans are typically something that individuals will consider if they have more significant resources and don't necessarily feel required to be as frugal as possible at this point in their life. Typically, the resources allow for more access to care and are especially more flexible if you travel. Many senior advantage plans can be regional in nature, and if you travel to an area where they don't have coverage or resources, they may not be as good of an option for you if you're traveling around the U.S. International health insurance is a whole separate deal. So if you are traveling internationally, I highly recommend you look into health insurance internationally. And a lot of that boils down to how can you get back to the U.S. and back to your primary home area as quickly as possible. So there are transportation policies and things of that nature, or those are aspects of those policies that you need to be mindful of. Along with that, there are many other factors involved in this. So I have included in the show notes a couple of flowcharts or walkthroughs that I think will be helpful if you are evaluating options. One is related to retirement before age 65, and one is focused on retirement after age 65. Please take a look at those. I hope that they're valuable for you. Another component of this equation is that if you are retiring before age 65 and don't have coverage through your spouse or former employer, getting coverage through a marketplace plan is not necessarily a bad option. And for some, depending upon their situation, I've actually seen millionaire clients qualify for some level of subsidy for their health insurance. Now, it doesn't happen for everybody, and it's not a guarantee, but a lot of it is dependent upon how their income is structured. And some of those clients have felt bad about getting a subsidized health insurance plan. But ultimately, I look at it and encourage clients to consider that the subsidies for the insurance are designed as part of that system. You can't hate the game, you just have to play it accordingly. So I want to make sure that you at least consider those options. If you save a little bit of money, even if you don't need it, great. If you feel compelled, you can go ahead and give that away or give that to other people if that's something that you want to do. But consider the healthcare marketplace options as a way to help bridge the gap from your retirement to age 65, especially. Another key component of Medicare that you need to be aware of is that if you are utilizing a health savings account for accumulating funds for health expenses and retirement, as soon as you go onto Medicare, you will no longer be able to make contributions into your health savings account. So it's something you want to be mindful of and just help prevent any sort of challenges down the road. So if you are turning 65 and signing on to Medicare halfway through the year, you still have the capacity to make a contribution to that HSA for the first part of the year, but be mindful of that. Make sure you're having a conversation with your tax preparer and your financial planner so you're not getting yourself in hot water. That is the primary gist of the question on course for today. I hope all of that was valuable for you. Before we jump back to the conversation with Amy, I did want to share one pro tip that I was reminded of recently. And I'm not sure if anyone else does this, but it has been a great method for me. And I have found what I think is a great way to pass the time on long runs and hopefully create a little bit of joy and connection in the world. As much as I would like to think that everything is the same for men and women in our world today, I know it is not. So I will suggest exercising a bit of caution on this pro tip for the ladies. Safety first, please. I want to make sure everybody is taken care of and is going to be able to return home safely. So just keep that in mind. When I am out for a long run on city streets, generally I run on the left side of the road. So I'm running into traffic so I can see the cars coming at me. And I am never surprised by a car sneaking up behind me, or if I happen to get a little tired and drift over a little bit, I can see that car coming at me. I don't have to worry about being blindsided by a vehicle. As the cars approach me, my pro tip, and what I've found a tremendous amount of joy in, is waving at every car that goes by. I give them a brief wave, a high five, kind of gesturing in their direction, let them know that I see them and they see me. I think there's a safety component there that I can recognize that they are paying attention. They see me on the road, and I feel a lot safer with that. But also, the fun part for me is I keep track of the people who wave back or give me a nod, a smile, a cheers with their coffee cup, whatever it might be. I make a little game out of it. So, for example, this morning's run, I waved to 15 cars, and 13 of them waved back. For me, it is a fun way to help pass the time, and I hope this has brightened someone else's day as well. I will say that most of the folks will generally smile and nod. I do generally get a couple of cheers and a couple of chuckles, but I count all of those positive interactions and I keep track of it. For me, it's just a fun way to pass the time, and I count any positive interaction as something good. Very rarely do I ever run into anybody that's really frustrated or persnickety, or I get a different hand gesture. Never had that happen in my 24 years of almost 25 years of triathlon. So highly recommend that if you haven't done it already, give it a try on your next long run. Give it an opportunity to create a connection with somebody else, some other random person in the world. Hopefully it'll make your day a little bit brighter as well as theirs. I hope that all of that was valuable for you. And now let's turn our attention back to Amy Woolsey. Amy Woolsey is currently working as an instructional academic coach in an elementary school in Minnesota. Prior to coaching, she taught a variety of levels ranging from first grade to middle school math. She states that triathlon is her hobby and so much more. Amy, welcome to Money Mile.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Amy, if we're doing this correctly, our listeners are out somewhere on a long, steady run. So we'll put links in the show notes to all the stuff that we talk about so our listeners can catch up and connect with you when we're all done. Is that okay with you?
Absolutely.
Wonderful. Amy, could you start us off and tell us a little bit about how you got started into triathlon?
Yeah, so I did my first triathlon in 2002. It was a sprint with an indoor swim. That seemed like a natural fit for me because I had a background in swimming. I swam competitively through high school. I heard about this triathlon where, again, the swim was indoors, and then we went outside for the bike and run. And I kind of thought it would be just a bucket list thing, one and done, and get back into my endurance running activities. But I was hooked. I loved the cross-training aspect of triathlon. And so I continued to do some different sprint triathlons for a few years. Then in 2006, I was inspired by a good friend who went from being a self-proclaimed couch potato to an Ironman triathlete through Team in Training. When she found out that her son had leukemia, she got involved with that. She was a huge inspiration to me. Like I said, she went from nothing to doing the Ironman in Wisconsin, the Madison. And that kind of was in the back of my mind. And then the next year, I think it was at my mom's group, we shared the Team Hoyt story of Dick and Ricky Hoyt and how he pulled and pushed his son through a complete Ironman triathlon. And we actually showed a video of that to illustrate a father's love for his son. That video, I remember sitting in my chair when that video concluded and there wasn't a dry eye in the room, and I was inspired by the story. But then I thought too, if these people can do it, I want to do it. And so I signed up and it was past the deadline. The race was sold out. So I ended up having to buy a community fund slot, but that fortunately was something I could do. And so started training. And that season, I did my first Olympic, my first half, and my first full all in one season.
Just jumped right in and did it. I like it.
Right in. Yep.
I also understand that since then you have progressed and continued to race triathlons as well. Can you tell us a little bit about what you've been up to since then?
Yeah, I've done 2 other fulls. I did the Louisville full in 2011, and I did Santa Rosa in 2017. And then in between there, I've done probably 15 to 20 halves and lots of sprints and Olympics as well. I probably do 6 or 7 races a year just because it's my hobby. It's my social outlet. It's how I stay mentally and physically healthy. So it kind of gives a purpose to my daily exercise. Yeah. And I just love having that goal out there, something to continue to strive for.
Mental health is a big part of a lot of training programs. It's a good opportunity for a lot of us to work on that particular area. I have found that over the years, success means different things to different people. Amy, how are you defining success these days?
Success for me looks like achieving a goal that I've set and then learning and having fun and having a positive impact on people along the way. That's something I try to bring a little more meaning to racing. I don't like the feeling that it's all about me ever. So I'm always looking for ways that I can have a positive impact on either the people I'm training with or maybe people at a race or my family. I have kids and grandkids. And so I hopefully am a positive influence on them in their physical activity and love for sport as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, if grandma can do this stuff, then, I could definitely get outside and go for a walk or do something.
Yeah.
Being a positive role model for family members, I think is a great aspect of this as well. I love that you're looking at this and recognizing that triathlon can feel kind of selfish at times and looking for ways to bring others into that and help be a role model for others. I think that's fantastic. In relation to your athletic endeavors now, you recently completed the Des Moines 70.3 earlier last year, finishing 3rd in your age group. So congratulations on a great race.
Thank you.
Can you tell us a little bit about how you prepared for this race and how things went on race day?
Yeah, it was going to be more of a challenge for me. I knew one, because it's an early race, it's a June race. And living in Minnesota, we typically aren't getting outside for training consistently until May. I knew a lot of it would have to be done indoors and I wouldn't have as much time to prepare as I would have liked to. However, I chose that race intentionally because we had a big family event. Our daughter got married on our property in October. So I knew the bulk of my summer was going to be spent preparing our property and preparing for a wedding. I thought, well, I still want to do a 70.3 this season. So let's just get it out of the way right at the beginning. So yeah, that's what I did. Swimming, I just don't typically start swimming that early in the season, but I found a friend, hold me accountable and meet me at the pool. So got the swimming going. The biking was really challenging. I don't like to do those long rides indoors on a trainer. So most of the people I normally bike with weren't doing anything long yet. So I had to find a new group of people to bike with. That turned out to be really rewarding and also challenging because they were faster than what I typically ride. So I had to push myself to keep up with the pack, so to speak. I was pleasantly surprised on race day. Things went even a little better than I was hoping for, best case scenarios. I was very grateful for, I think those new training partners really pushed me. And then I also had a really fabulous fan club at the race. I have a sister that lives locally in the Des Moines area. So her and her family and one of her good friends were out. And the run course in Des Moines is multiple loops. So I was able to go by and get high fives and cheers every few miles during the run, which is obviously where you typically need it the most. So that was very inspiring as well.
Yeah, that's great. And I feel like the longer distance races and the Ironman branded races in particular have done a good job recently of making courses that are or promoting courses that are more spectator friendly. And obviously, it's a little bit more difficult on the bike, but having multiple loop courses on the run, being able to see everybody and get that boost of energy as you're going through. For me, I think it's great. I know it can be a little bit challenging on the full distance courses. We're like, okay, I'm going by the finish line again. That can be a little bit challenging, but I really get a lot of energy out of seeing the spectators and seeing the people that you care about that are out there cheering you on. So I think that that's great that you had a good experience on the course with them. Kudos to you for the awareness and the adaptation to that, looking forward enough to say, oh, hey, I know I'm going to be busy doing something else, and not saying, oh, well, guess this just isn't going to be a year for triathlon, but adapting to that and saying, yes, how do I succeed at this? Sounds like that might have pushed you out of your comfort zone a little bit and you benefited from it. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, exactly. I didn't foresee all of that happening. Like you restated, I really just wanted to be sure and get a half in. It'd been a couple of years actually. For a while there, I was doing one or two halves every season, and I hadn't been able to do one the prior 2 years. So I just thought, I don't want to go another year. So yeah, how can we make this happen? And yeah, it did end up pushing me outside my comfort zone and ended up being pleasantly surprised with the results.
And how did everything go with the wedding?
The wedding was beautiful. Yep. The weather was almost ideal, a little bit windy, but it was all outdoors. So the whole thing was on our property, the ceremony, the reception, the dance, cocktail hour, all of that. And so it was a lot of work, but highly worth it, especially now that we have the photos back.
Wonderful. Well, I'm glad to hear that everything went well. I know that takes a ton of work, even with well maintained property to get it ready for a wedding and obviously a very important family event takes a lot of work. I'm so glad that you were able to do all of that and live your best life and do the things that are important to you and support your daughter and have a wonderful ceremony for her. I think that's fantastic. So I'm glad to hear that everything went well.
Thank you.
You are also very active with your Tri Club, which I understand is Do Tri. Did I pronounce that correctly?
Correct. Yeah. Do for duathlon. So it's a multi-sport club.
Oh, perfect. Okay. Sorry, I wasn't exactly sure where that was going from, and I appreciate you connecting those dots there. So, what is your favorite aspect of being involved in a Tri Club or multi-sport club like Do Tri?
I would say it's the motivation I get from the people in the club. So even beyond just having people to train with, which is huge, but even just being on the executive board and going to meetings, even in the off season, I find that being around people that are of the same mindset and the same commitment to triathlon as I am is just inspiring. You know, we can go days in the off season without talking to anyone else that does the try. And so this was my first year on the e-board. So I realized, yeah, just going to our meetings and talking about what are your plans for next season? What races are you doing? Or, what are you doing this off season for training? And so the motivation and camaraderie of the people in the club is great. And then I also love that we support each other at the races. So a lot of us tend to do the same local races. So we'll have our tent there. We'll have a gathering before and after to talk pre-race strategy and then just to celebrate together. So yeah, those are some really positive aspects of being part of a club.
That's wonderful. And I know there are many aspects to being involved in a club with like-minded folks, regardless of your activity. Triathlon is one of those things that can be, if done a certain way, can be very isolating. So having an opportunity to connect with like-minded people, especially in the off season and in the time frame where you don't necessarily see them on a regular basis, I think it's great that you're really plugged into that. And kudos to you for stepping up from a leadership perspective and being on the executive board. I know personally that it's an additional level of responsibility to do that, but you get out of it what you put into it. At least in my opinion, my experience, the more involved you are, the better your experience. Would you agree with that?
Yes, for sure. We just had our annual banquet or kind of end of season wrap up a couple weeks ago, and it all kind of came together there. And I just saw how beneficial the club was to everybody that was in attendance. And so that was a great opportunity to say, yep, it's worth it, even though, in the dead of winter, sometimes you don't want to get out and go to a meeting. But yeah, for sure, it's a very meaningful thing for myself and all the people involved. So it's another rewarding experience for sure.
So, what would you consider to be the most underrated aspect of triathlon or something you think that more triathletes should know more about?
I think nutrition and recovery are two really underrated aspects of the sport. Two things that took me the longest to tap into. And I won't even say I've figured them out completely, but that's probably where I'm learning the most right now as a seasoned triathlete, as a grandmaster in the sport. I'm really actually kind of passionate about learning more about nutrition and recovery because also the older you get, you're probably not going to get any faster by training harder because the check engine light tends to come on a lot more when I try to amp up my training, but I think I can gain some speed through proper nutrition and recovery. So that's where I'm putting my focus right now.
Could you share with us maybe a couple of tips of like the things you're learning about or the things you're interested in on the nutrition front as well as the recovery front? Just a couple of quick ideas of things you're finding interesting these days.
Yeah, for nutrition, I'm figured out, which is maybe kind of obvious, but consume the most that you can during the race that your gut will allow you to. And to maximize that, I've found that the less just simple sugars in the nutrition that I take in, the better. So I found some gels. The Huma gels are made mostly just from actual fruit puree and chia seeds. So any kind of nutrition that involves more whole foods is much more easy my gut. So I'm able to take in more. Sometimes on training runs, I'll even just bring a baggie of dried mango, so some kind of dried fruit. Sometimes I'll even make my own gels with dates and chia seeds and lemon juice and some salt. The more natural the nutrition is, the more of it I can take in. So I think a lot of us have been on those in those races where if we have to take in another gel pack full of cane sugar, we're gonna lose our cookies. So yeah, I have learned that it is important to take in as many calories as possible, but what you take in can have a big impact.
I'd love how you're pivoting that to be able to say, hey, I have a good premise here. How can I adjust the protocols, rather than, take one more additional chemical laden packet? How can I find something that works for me? And I imagine that took some exploration on your part. You got to try some different things and see what's work. And you found a couple things. Huma gel, did I pronounce that correctly?
Yes.
I have not heard of those, so I'm always learning new stuff. I have to try some different things, but I like the idea of that more natural component as opposed to just another little packet of chemicals.
hmm
I'll definitely look into that. So thank you for the suggestion there. And then also, you mentioned that you're really passionate about recovery these days. So anything in particular standing out to you there?
Yeah, more rest days I'm learning are essential. I actually purchased a training plan from Training Peaks for this next race, my A race this summer, which is the Michigan 70.3. It was kind of cool because you could put in what you were looking for in a training plan, and they asked you several questions and then came back with a suggestion. And so mine came back, they offered a master's training plan, which I'd never seen that before. I've always followed a training plan. I love training plans, and I'm pretty meticulous once I commit myself to a plan. But the problem, I think, if I'm just getting a generic plan off the internet, it's going to be geared more towards like a male in their 30s. So it's not very realistic for me to think I can follow that. So slow learner here, but I finally figured out I need a master's plan. And the beauty of that is that it gives me 2 rest days a week. So I know that those rest days are really important to my recovery. And then the other thing I'm really learning a lot about is cold therapy. I'm kind of passionate about that.
Oh, Burr, you're a brave soul. I've seen the cold tubs and all that stuff out there. So how long have you been doing the cold therapy?
Consistently for about a year and a half. So whether it's an ice bath or even just filling my tub with the coldest water possible after a long run, sitting in that. On mornings where I don't have time for that, I'll just do a cold shower. So turn my shower as cold as it can go and focusing that for that shoulder that's acting up or hamstrings, I'll let the cold water sit on that for 2 to 3 minutes. But then probably the most drastic thing I've only done it once, but I plan to continue. There's a Nordic spa in my area. And so you go and alternate between sauna and ice baths for up to an hour and just go back and forth.
Okay. I've heard good things about the cold therapy, and everybody that I talk to that does it raves about it. One of these days, I will have to give that a shot. I will admit, I live in Northern California for a reason. It was 35 degrees on my run this morning. 35 degrees and my teeth were chattering. Cold weather is not my friend. So just the thought of that is somewhat daunting, but I appreciate you sharing that. One of these days, I'm going to give that a go. I understand the primary benefit of the cold therapy is the inflammation reduction and trying to mitigate that. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yes, it reduces the inflammation and then a lot of soreness that would be related to the inflammation. After a long run, I almost always want to get in a cold bath, and it makes a huge difference in the level of soreness I feel the next day and then how recovered I feel for that next workout as well. The other thing I've learned that helps a lot with recovery is compression. So I actually invested in a set of the compression boots.
Oh, okay.
Where I really became sold on those was at Nationals a couple of years ago. I did back to back. So I did the Olympic on Saturday and the sprint on Sunday, and they were demoing some compression boots at the expo. So I sat in those for 15, 20 minutes after my Olympic race on Saturday, and my legs actually felt fresher on Sunday, the second day. And I really think the compression boots had a lot to do with it. So I was sold. I bought a pair. Yeah, I use them almost daily when I'm really training hard. So
That's great. I've heard some, I guess, mixed feelings on the compression boots, but I think if it works for you, great, keep going. I think to some extent that can be a challenge with triathlon as you hear somebody say a good thing about something, you try it and maybe it doesn't work for you. And like, oh, well, it's kind of hard to find that. But a lot of it for me has just been experimentation. Like, hey, well, I'm going to try this. Does it work for me? Yes, no, okay, great. Let's try something else or let's keep moving. If they work for you, then wonderful. I look at that and I think, hey, at this point in my life, I'm getting a little bit older every year as well. At this point, I might every little bit helps, and if that's something that is helping from your side, I've never tried the boots myself, but I might have to give it a go.
yeah, I probably would never have bought them if I hadn't have had that experience trying them out at the race. Yeah, and had a good experience with them that way. Some people say, well, it's just a matter of you sit down and put your feet up when you wear the compression boots. So there's probably some value in that too. But I know I also respond well to compression socks. I feel like that does do something for me to speed the recovery, increases the blood flow for sure.
Yeah, it certainly makes sense to me. Thank you for being part of the Money Mile community. As a valued listener of the Money Mile podcast, we want to hear from you. We are constantly working to improve our content to be more engaging and relevant to your fitness and finance journey. Whether you're a triathlete, a fitness enthusiast, or just looking forward to being an active retiree, or all of the above, your opinion matters to us. We've put together a quick survey to gather your thoughts on the podcast, what you love, and what we can improve on. The link to our survey will be in the show notes for newer episodes and will also be available in the Money for the Long Run newsletter. If you are not receiving the newsletter, please check out wallerfc.com and scroll to the bottom of the site to sign up for the newsletter. The survey will only take a few minutes, and as a thank you for sharing your insights, you will be entered to win a Garmin Forerunner 965 Premium Watch. This is the perfect companion for tracking your triathlon training, fitness goals, and more. Why should someone consider taking this survey? To help us create content that you love, to shape the future of Money Mile, and also to get a chance to win an amazing Garmin watch worth almost $600. Stay tuned and we'll announce the winner on the podcast soon. Don't miss your chance to have a say in the future of Money Mile and grab the chance to score an incredible Garmin watch as a thank you. We can't wait to hear what you think. Thank you for being part of the Money Mile community, and we'll let you get back to the rest of this episode. One of the things you had mentioned in there is your check engine light comes on. So I was curious if you could maybe elaborate on that a little bit and tell others, like, what does that feel like for you when your check engine light comes on?
Well, it feels frustrating, first of all, because it usually happens when I'm getting in a groove, doing some speed work, feeling like I'm making some progress. And then it could be a hamstring or a pain in my foot that's never been there before. Those nagging things that if you don't listen to your body, it's going to become a bigger problem.
Okay. I think we all have those, and sometimes it can be challenging as driven athletic people to take a moment and listen to those things. My guideline has always been like, hey, well, if something pops up, give it a mile. Like, if it still hurts in a mile, then you got to pay attention to it. But I am one of those that happens to have, somebody called it glass ankles at one point. So like I'll roll my ankle on any given run. But if it still hurts in a mile, then I need to pay attention to it. That's been kind of my protocol. And I think that being self-aware, just say, oh, hey, yeah, generally I'm feeling pretty good, but there's something going on here that wasn't there yesterday or wasn't there the last time I ran, and just be self-aware enough about what's going on. So I love the analogy of the check engine light, like, oh, wait, something's going on. It doesn't mean that the wheels are coming off and you got to stop immediately, but you got to pay attention.
Got to make a plan. Like you can still drive a little bit with the check engine light on, but you need to make a plan for what you're going to do to remedy the problem. So whether it's more rest, ice or cold therapy, some compression, a trip to the chiropractor, all of the above.
Depending upon how bad it is. Yes, absolutely. So look at those. All right. You alluded to earlier that you have another big race coming up this year. What is your A race for 2025 and the year ahead?
My A race is Michigan 70.3. Just signed up for that. That's a September race and convinced a friend to join me. So we'll be doing a lot of the long runs and rides together. And doubtful for a PR, but I'm sure I'll have a time that I want to beat. But yeah, I think I'm past the point of PRs in my life. But like I said, I tend to look for other reasons to continue racing, other goals, whether it's impacting somebody along the way or hitting a time that I know is a challenge, but also doable.
And being able to do that with a friend is also a great experience. I've heard the saying that misery loves company, but I think triathlon takes a little bit further. If you have somebody else that, like you alluded to earlier, somebody that can help you stay accountable and make it to the pool when you need to make it there, and somebody that's, hey, yeah, we're going to ride long this weekend. Let's go get it done. Having someone as a co-pilot or a friend that can go along with those things can make that a much more enjoyable experience. It's even better when you're able to race with a friend. I know I've had a couple of experiences in my life where I've been able to race with really good friends, special Ironman races or whatever it might be, really long stuff. And it's really nice to know that there's somebody else out there that you really care about that is out there doing the same thing as you, and you're working through it together. It's one of those bonding experiences. I won't say it's like Navy SEALs or anything like that, but it's as close as I can get to it. It sure feels like that, kind of going through that, the blood, sweat, and tears of it all together. It can be a really great bonding experience. So your friend, have they done other 70.3 races before? Or is this going to be their first?
Nope. She has done a couple other 70.3s.
She knows what she's getting into.
She does. Yep. She knows.
Good. Very good. And then I understand you're gonna stay a little bit after the race and turn a little bit into a vacation as well.
Correct. We are. We're going to head further north into Michigan and go up to Mackinac Island and do some sightseeing around there. From where we live, then we'll end up circling the whole state of Michigan, because going to the race, we'll go down around the southern end and then we'll go up around the northern. And so make the whole loop and see some great scenery from what I understand. I've never been to Michigan, so that was another reason I chose that race. Try to use racing as an opportunity to see places I've never seen before too. So rather than just be a standard vacationer, I like to do a triathlon or a running race and then do my sightseeing and vacationing.
Oh, I like the sound of that. It sounds like you've got a great experience lined up ahead of you there. So one question that I do like to ask our guests is, if you only had $100 to spend on any triathlon gear, what would you buy?
Yeah, I had to think about this for a while, but I landed on a really good light for my bike, a flashing rechargeable light with really high illumination. We've lost 2 triathletes in our community to bike accidents. They were hit by vehicles from behind. So most people in my club are passionate about having a good light on their bike. And so, to just say I have $100, I'm going to put it all into a really, really good light. That's what I would do.
Absolutely makes sense to me. And I'm sorry to hear about the loss of your colleagues there in your tri club. Or was that relatively recent that those folks had passed, or
both within the last 10 years, I'd say.
Yeah, still very very much real in that experience and very recent.
Something to still think about. It has, like when I go for a ride with the club, we all have 1, if not 2 lights on, and almost everybody wears high vis jackets and jerseys now. So it had a positive impact in that regard.
I am sorry to hear about the loss of your colleagues, but I am encouraged to hear that that everyone else is continuing on and taking appropriate measures and being safe out there. I certainly appreciate the suggestion for the bike light. Sometimes it can be a little bit, oh well, it's a short ride, or it's one more thing you got to deal with on top of the jacket and the gloves and the helmet and the whatever. It's important. Well, and my perspective is daylight or otherwise. Generally, I'm not a big rider at night or dawn and dusk timeframes. When I ride outside, it's like light of the day. But I still think a good rear blinking light, just make sure everybody's paying attention. And the consequences are severe, so it's worth it to take a minute and throw a light on there if you got it. So I love the suggestion there.
Well, that's why when I heard $100, that seems like a lot for a light. And typically I would be like, oh, let's just get the $20 one. But yeah, by spending up to 100 or more on a light, it's going to be very visible in the daylight. And it's not going to be that hard to use because it'll stay charged, so it's just on your bike. You occasionally have to take it off every few rides, maybe to recharge it, but it's not a hard step to take.
I like that. That's great. Amy, as we're kind of wrapping up our conversation today, what is it that you would most like the world to know about you and your journey in triathlon?
Well, I think I would just say that triathlon has been very rewarding and formative in my life, more so than I ever expected when I did that first sprint with a pool swim 22 years ago. It's become more than even just a hobby for me. Like I think you mentioned in the intro, it has been a way for me to maintain my physical and mental health. And it's really been an avenue for building some of the best friendships that I have. And it's also a place for me to share my faith that's really important to me. And so I've had several opportunities to encourage people with a message of hope when we're running or riding or traveling to and from races. So yeah, that's been a fulfilling part of triathlon for me as well, is the relationships and the mental health benefits along with the obvious physical benefits.
Well, that's great. And I very much appreciate you sharing with us a little bit about your journey in triathlon. Amy, we wish you all of the best at your future races and all of your future endeavors. Hope everything goes well with the Michigan 70.3 in September with you and your friend doing the racecation. And we'll look forward to seeing great things out of your triathlon career moving forward. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today on Money Mile. Hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thanks for having me on, and thanks for doing the podcast. It's been really fun to listen to.
I hope this episode of Money Mile was valuable for you. If it was, please share the podcast with your training buddies and friends. Keep in mind that if you work out, everything else will too, and we'll look forward to talking with you next time on Money Mile.